Hello? I think at this particular point in time, the formation of an Oregon forest business plan has to rank among the very, very highest priorities in this state. I think we need a robust, top-notch business plan advised by the senior-most leaders of the state from a cross-section, frankly, a subsection of this room right here. Because forestry issues are no longer confined to rural Oregon. This is a statewide issue, and we need a business plan. And let me just kind of confess that I'm not particularly comfortable with the term business plan, because it doesn't seem to quite fit for us. I know I did not enter forestry school in order to submit business plans. I entered forestry school to kind of a spiritual connection with the forests, and yet I kept the term business plan up here because I think it suggests some very, very important elements. It suggests discipline, it suggests reality, making tough choices, making hard decisions, and most of all, it demands action. And that's exactly what's needed on Oregon's forests. I was first invited into the Oregon forest debate after I arrived here, and I was talking to Governor Kulongoski. And Governor Kulongoski invited me to weigh in on our federal forest issues. And I said, nah, it's really not what I do. From back east. My comfort zone is more private forest, conservation, finance. And he just laughed and he said, Matt, if you want to move the needle, if you want to make a difference here in Oregon, you have to weigh in on our federal forest issues. In Oregon, over 25% of our land is owned and managed by our federal agencies. And of our forests, over 60% is owned and managed by federal agencies. And when the Nature Conservancy, way back when, looked at the most urgent priorities from an environmental perspective, it surprised me to learn that they named our federal forests as being among the very, very highest priorities from an environmental perspective. This is a statewide issue, and it has been for a long time, but I think with particular urgency around the issue of fire. This is an image of the Eagle Creek fire from 2017, which very famously jumped the Columbia River. You can see a boat here in the foreground. And even as we look down to the tragedy that has unfolded in California, I mean, the unspeakable loss of life down there. 88 people perished, 14,000 homes, an entire community wiped out due to a forest fire. I mean, even as you grieve that community, I think you still have to sober up and ask yourself, can that happen here? And the truth of the matter is, it very nearly did. Troutdale, not far from here, was under threat from the Eagle Creek fire. The Eagle Creek fire burned up 13 miles over a period of 16 hours from an east wind. The only thing that saved Troutdale was the fact that the wind shifted and sent it back east where it threatened Hood River. So this is an issue that we're fairly familiar with. And then you look at the issue of air quality, which frankly has farther-reaching human health threats and problems. You just look at the past year. Southern Oregon experiencing the worst air quality in the country in July. Portland, air quality ranks second worst in the world. This right here in Oregon. I can tell you, as a dad who took his kids out biking without checking the air quality index, I mean, we could barely, I was coughing and choking for the next 6 weeks after that. And of course, the high growth area of Central Oregon and Bend, numerous air quality danger warnings issued over this past summer. I'm going to show you another colorful map. I know you just saw some. This is a catastrophic fire danger risk assessment. And as you might imagine, red is bad. And I would just draw your attention not just to the extent of the red, but where it's located. And look at how covered up Medford is. I think this explains why the Shakespeare Festival was closed down for, I think, 26 days this past summer. Go up to Bend, go to Central Oregon. Look at that bright red. And then head up to the north and see Hood River, which brings us back to the Eagle Creek fire. But if you look actually more subtly at the orange areas, there's orange in Clackamas County, and a significant amount of it. Orange right there in Lane County. So this interface with our major population centers is real. And that explains a lot of why our cities are filled with smoke right now. And that map doesn't even consider climate change. I put up here 2 reports that have come out in the last few months. One of them just came out last week. One from the UN and the other one from the our own federal government, both of which have said climate change is far worse than we thought, and it's going to be far worse going ahead. And the direct relationship with fire. Over the last 30 years, Oregon State's researchers have estimated that over the last 30 years, 50% of our wildfire was due to climate change. And when you look ahead at the amount of fuel that last slide showed and the impacts of climate change and the population growth that we just heard about, this is a very, very serious issue. It's a statewide issue that threatens human life, human health. You're going to hear in a moment about water. It threatens our water supplies. How? A lot of our water reservoirs are downstream from forested zones. The Bull Run watershed was threatened by the Eagle Creek fire. Obviously, property loss, tourism estimates in 2017, $51 million was lost in tourism dollars. This is an economic development issue, obviously affects our public finances. And then you want to just really hone in on the social justice elements of this. And it's one thing for the state leadership to be sitting in here today considering this, but think about the folks that are really impacted. This is an image of farm workers out there during the smoke season. These are the folks that are out harvesting our food so we can eat right at the height of fire season. Their faces sometimes covered up, sometimes not. When you think about who is most affected by this issue, it is our most vulnerable populations. It's our most vulnerable populations that don't have the insulation in their homes to actually protect themselves from fire. They might not have the air conditioning. They're the folks that are going to be most prone to smoke exposure. And then after smoke exposure, they're the folks that are going to have the least likely access to quality health care to deal with its effects. In the doomsday scenario where watersheds do get contaminated with fire retardants and mudslides, it's going to be our most vulnerable populations that are most affected by this. It's our working class that we send out to fight these fires to keep us safe. This is a statewide issue. It's no longer a rural issue or out in the forest. This is urban, every bit as much as it is rural. There's nobody in this room and for that matter, no Oregonian, that's unaffected by this issue. So what are we going to do? Are we going to panic? I think, of course not. I think there's actually a lot of really, really good work to draw from. This is not an issue that I've spent my career on, but I've spent most of the last year on this issue. And I've been working with state and federal agencies, nonprofits, and very surprising to me, the quality of the work, the talented people that are working on these issues. So we're not, the cupboard is not bare. And a lot of this quality work is translating into real results. We're actually seeing forests restored, resilient, all across the state of Oregon. And what's neat about this is that it's being done through collaboration, very much the Oregon way. Because after the spotted owl wars, these communities were left devastated. And so how did they piece things back together? Through collaboration. Diverse groups at the community level got together and started looking at what do we want for our forests. And they started problem solving. Right now across Oregon, we have 26 active collaborations. It's a real success story. So we do have the tools. The problem is we're not operating at the scale of the need. We need to scale up, which is frankly the expertise of a lot of folks right here in this room. We need to get from a small scale proof of concept to a larger scale and really move the needle. This is my suggestion around a business plan. We need to take all these pieces that are not being optimized and put them together in an actionable business plan. Vision, principles, goals, real disciplined forecasts, hard choices. Where are we going to direct our resources? What kind of agreements do we need with the federal agencies? At this point, as we're sitting here, tremendous work being done by the state agencies, federal agencies. We do not have a comprehensive agreement between the state and federal agencies as to what are our goals over the next 10 to 20 years. On this last point around agreement, in 2019, there's a door opening for us because the federal agencies have actually recognized the same issue here and are inviting Oregon and all the western states into partnerships between the federal agencies and the states. Oregon should seize this opportunity and develop a real meaningful agreement backed by this business plan, backed by strategy. That needs to come from this broader leadership team in this room. Which gets me to the next point. Business plans are great, money's great. But we all know, as leaders, we all know that the single biggest ingredient here for this success is going to be leadership. There's leadership at two levels. There's a normal leadership of somebody needs to wake up every morning and be thinking about this and solving this. And people use the term czar. I think you know what that suggests. But the broader strategic leadership to support the governor, to support our delegation, to really drive this, to keep this conversation alive and moving. Oregon has a legacy of this type of leadership, particularly around natural resource issues. You think about our beach law, you think about our bottle bill, you think about the first ever Forest Practices Act in the country. People emulate what we do here in Oregon all across the world. They expect us to lead. So what can you do? Well, I already said, keep this conversation going. This needs to be front burner. And beyond that, when I think about what are going to be the indicators that show me we're going to actually do something here, it's not going to be agreements between agencies, although that's a critical part. It's going to be when we're a hub of innovation tackling this issue. The same way that New York is a hub of finance, Boston's a hub of education, California a hub of technology. We should be the hub of sustainable forest business practices to tackle this and export those technologies to other areas all across the West and all across the world. Come today to our breakout session. Even if you don't think about forests, and especially if you don't think about forests, we need your help and we need your perspective. So when you look ahead, there is a scenario of continued gridlock, continued failure, continued kicking the can down the road. There's certainly a greater than 0% chance of probability, but there's also a real possibility for breakthrough right here in Oregon that does things that matter right here in Oregon and presenting a national model. Not only a national model that will get immediate reception across the other Western states, but a model based on collaboration and inclusiveness and Oregon's values, helping our most vulnerable. Statewide issue, done in the Oregon way. Thank you.